start taking a look at some number patterns. And then later in the week, we're going to use those number patterns to actually build some grids and some graphs. But we've got to figure out some things about patterns. Now, what I'm going to show you today is probably going to look very familiar to you. You've seen these multiple times before. So we're looking at either function tables or in and out tables or the in and out machine, or they go by lots of different names. But basically, we're looking at generating some sort of rule that's going to tell us if we put one number in, something else is going to come out. So taking a look at this one, we're going to look at how we should be determining these and how we do these. So if I look at this in and out table, okay, the inside right here is where we put a number in. Now, this center line right here is where something happens to it, some sort of rule. So there's a rule that happens right here so that from this side to this side, something happens to it. So every time I put a number on this side on the inside, it goes over, it hits the rule, and then it changes the number. And it's the same exact rule every single time. And that's one of the things that throws some kids off, is they look at it and they think it's a different rule. So I have a couple basic principles for how to solve these things, which makes life much easier. So the first thing you need to do, because now that you're in 5th grade, you're going to have adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing rules. So the first thing you need to do is you're going to have to look at it. You're going to have to figure out step 1. Okay, is it getting bigger or smaller? Okay, so that's the first thing we should be asking ourselves. Okay, so if I go from the in to the out, did the number get larger or did it get smaller? Now, the reason we do that, there's 2 operations that we know of that are going to make the numbers larger, and there's 2 operations that are going to make it smaller. So if I'm going from in to out and it's getting larger or bigger, then I know that my rule has to be either an adding rule or a multiplying rule. If the numbers are getting smaller, then there's 2 ways to make numbers smaller, at least with whole numbers. With this, we're going to either be subtracting or we're going to be dividing. Okay, so we know that that's what's happening with our rules. So what I would do is I'd take a look. I go from 10 to 40, 2 to 8, 4 to 16, 7 to 28, and 8 to 32. Okay, so every single time it's getting larger. So now I know this is either adding or multiplying. It's getting larger. Now the next thing I do, I start looking at, well, how much bigger is it getting? Okay, so from 10 to 40, how much bigger did it get? Now you could just do the opposite. Well, let's subtract real quick. 10 to 40 means you had to add 30. So I had to add 30 to get from 10 to 40. Now, if that's the rule, then when I put 2 in, I should be doing 2 plus 30 makes 8. Okay, so to get from 2 to 8, I'm adding 6 on. All right, and to get from 4 to 16, I'm adding 12 on. Now, if this was just a simple addition rule, then it would be the same exact adding number every single time. Okay, so that's my next strategy. That's my next step. Once I know it's bigger or smaller, I look and I compare the changes. Okay, and what I mean by that is exactly what's happening. This changed, it went up 30. This changed, it went up 6. This changed, it got bigger by 12. If when you look at it, it's the same change every time, like it goes from 10 to 40, 2 to 32, 4 to 34, like every single time it's doing plus 30, then that's your rule. If that's not the case and it's a different amount that it's going up by, a different addition rule every time, now we know it's a multiplication rule. So I know right there, this has to be multiply. So now I would stop and think, how do I get from 10 to 40? All right, well, I would multiply by 4. Now, 5th graders are notoriously lazy, like me, so I can't complain too much. All right, but you can't stop if just one of these works. You should be checking to make sure at least 2, if not 3 of these spots do work. So is 2 times 4 8? Yeah, so that works. Is 4 times 4 16? Yes, that works. All right, if it works on at least 3 of these, you have the rule. But I know people out there, they like to find one rule that works, they put it down, and then they find out later on that there was actually a couple rules that it could have been. And if they would have tried it on a couple of different numbers, they would have realized, oh, only one of them works for all of these numbers. So you really got to be careful about that. Now looking at this one, we know this rule is multiplied by 4. Okay, so that's our rule for this one. So one of the things you're going to have to do today, you're going to have to be able to determine rules. So use the strategy that I told you. First, decide whether it's getting bigger or smaller. Second, compare it. How much bigger or how much smaller is it getting? If it's a consistent change, it's always getting 10 bigger or it's always getting 10 smaller every single time, then your rule is pretty simple. It's an adding or subtracting rule. But if it's changing by different amounts, it's going up by 30, it's going up by 12, it's going down by 15, it's going down by 5. If it's changing, then it's a multiplication or a division rule. Okay? And once you know the rule, it becomes much easier, or once you know the operation, it becomes much easier to figure out, well, what number is it being multiplied by or added to? Now, I will say this. Later on, we are going to get to the point where you're going to try this and no single operation will work. Second and fifth grade, sometimes, and especially people like me, we will give you rules where there's 2 things that happen, like that you multiply it by 2 and then add 1. Those are real tricky, and we'll worry about those a little bit more later on. But I did want you to know, down the line, you will see things like that. So just take your time. It's the same strategy every time, and we'll work on it more as we get closer to it. All right, so good luck today. Try your best. And there's another video on this one, so you get to see more of me. Yeah.